Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Dodaro, for being here today and being so forthright with our panel. The high-risk list is a valuable tool for the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to hear from you here today. I want to start today by looking at cybersecurity. GAO listed cybersecurity as an area needing significant attention. Can you explain why this is?
There's enormous risk to our country, both in terms of sensitive information being able to be accessed, denial of service attacks, shutting down of our critical infrastructure in a number of areas. So this is enormous as all organizations, public and private sector, have been more dependent on the internet and more on computerized systems, both industrial systems as well as information technology and other operational systems. Our exposure is enormous, and it is something that hasn't been adequately addressed. I first raised this issue in 1997, critical infrastructure protection, 2003. And so the government's still not operating at a pace commensurate with the serious evolving threat. Now, we've articulated at least 4 areas and 10 things that need to be done, and Mr. Marinos, our expert, can elaborate on that, Congressman.
Very good.
Yeah, Congressman Langworthy, I think ultimately the critical path is clearly there. We have been calling for decades for a comprehensive strategy to be established. We've seen the last 5 administrations, including this one, put forward a national strategy. The rubber's going to meet the road with implementation, because ultimately the threats are going to be pervasive, they're going to be ever evolving, and if we're not able to determine whether or not we're doing an effective job at protecting our nation against them, we're always going to be behind.
It seems like something that an endless supply of resources can go towards, without necessarily achieving what we need to do. Since 2010, GAO has made 4,000 recommendations, and approximately 670 of those have been made in just the last 2 years alone. Is there a reason why less than 1/4 of the recommendations have been satisfied?
This area hasn't been given enough priority, in my opinion, by the top leadership and the departments and agencies all along. With these recommendations we make are very specific. They should be able to be implemented in a much more rapid fashion, particularly since the evolving threat is happening at a more rapid pace. So we're falling further and further behind, in my opinion.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would wholeheartedly agree. Ultimately, it's about agency leadership committing resources to actually addressing the issues, as the Comptroller General noted. In fact, many of our recommendations are very technical and very specific in nature. So in many ways, we're providing a roadmap for the agencies to implement them. A lot of times, they're challenged by legacy systems that need to be updated in order to actually improve security. But at the end of the day, if agency leadership commits resources to it, they can do a better job than they have so far.
So most of the GAO's criteria, they're all rated as partially met. Now, the same rating that they had in the last Congress. How does GAO measure progress for each criterion?
It can be very complex, in part because, as the Comptroller General noted, this is a very expansive area. So if we're looking, for example, at whether the administration has implemented a comprehensive strategy, there are going to be certain metrics that we would like to see, specificity in who's responsible for each of the actions that have been identified as a priority, ultimately when expectation we should have as a nation that we'll see those goals met. But if you're looking at, for example, specific agency information security issues, then those measurements are going to come ultimately at seeing improvements in key areas that federal legislation calls for not only the agencies but the inspector generals to assess on an annual basis. So those would be things like addressing weaknesses in a comprehensive and a quick manner, and being able to see that they're able to continuously monitor the protections that they've put in place.
Very good. I think we know the risks to national cybersecurity if these criteria don't improve. But what recommendations, in closing, would you have for us as members of Congress in relation to protecting our digital privacy and hardening our systems?
Yeah. Actually, one is to hold oversight hearings on the implementation plan when it's developed, and get our critique of the implementation plan, and then have steady progress reports on that plan and whether it's being executed on time. We've also recommended that Congress update the privacy laws. You know, the original Privacy Act was passed in 1974. There have been some modest changes, but it's completely out of date in terms of protecting the privacy of American citizens.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.